No matter how tense politics can get, there are a few traditions that still tend to bring political rivals together, like tributes to veterans and fallen soldiers on this Memorial Day, or, of course, funerals of major figures. And then, beyond the solemn, there is another modern tradition with some unity that comes with the official unveiling of a former president's portrait in the White House. In fact, here's how President Obama approached that task when unveiling President George W. Bush's portrait in 2012.
In this job, no decision that reaches your desk is easy. No choice you make is without costs. No matter how hard you try, you're not going to make everybody happy. I think that's something President Bush and I both learned pretty quickly. And that's why from time to time, those of us who've had the privilege to hold this office find ourselves turning to the only people on earth who know the feeling. We may have our differences politically, but the presidency transcends those differences.
Worthwhile sentiments, but the tradition appears to be ending. No plans right now to hold any official unveiling of President Obama's White House portrait. NBC reporting neither Obama nor Trump appear interested in trying to come together for it this year. The article noting it's too soon to know whether the absence of the uniquely harmonious occasion is just a reflection of a singular dynamic between those presidents or whether it's symbolic of a broader, bitter political era. Now, that is unfortunate, especially because it denies the public one official moment to take in this fusion of art and history with the benefit of a few years of history behind us. In fact, both Barack and Michelle Obama tapped a new generation of artists for the honor. The president chose Kehinde Wiley, while Michelle chose Amy Sherald, who painted the iconic image you see here of Michelle that now hangs in the Smithsonian Institution's National Portrait Gallery. And right now, very special announcement, Amy Sherald joins us. Her art also spans far beyond that portrait in history. She's distinguished herself for documenting the contemporary African-American experience and is both the first woman and the first African-American to win first prize in a National Portrait Gallery competition. Thanks for joining me.
Hi, thank you for having me. How are you?
I'm all right. This is an interesting one, and we wanted to get into it with you. First of all, just big picture, pun intended, what is the value, in your view, of both these portraits, of the ceremony? It's obviously not your call that these presidents aren't doing one, but what's the value here?
I think that the opportunity for the unveiling to happen in the White House is a great opportunity. The White House is not only a symbol of our democracy, but it's also a de facto museum of sorts, and it holds an archive of and artifacts of the people that lived in the White House before. And I remember watching the unveiling, and I remember being heartened seeing these two political parties come together and all politics aside, it was a beautiful celebration that us as artists are able to take a part of. And I think it's really sad that he's leaving this tradition behind. And I think it's also very disheartening for the artists that have the opportunity to participate, to create these portraits and become a part of a historical legacy.
That makes perfect sense what you're saying. And that legacy, again, is part of it. We're talking about the prestige, the symbolism, the history. And we're talking, of course, as well, obviously, about the first Black family in the Oval Office in the White House. We'll put back up some of the imagery of your Michelle portrait. Many people will remember this. It was striking. It was different than some portraits we've seen in the past. With her big flowing dress, you see her there on the right. Walk us through what you did there, what you were going for.
For my portrait?
Mm-hmm.
The first thing that I thought about when I got the commission was that I wanted to create an image of her that was universal and something that was different than all of the images that we saw of her in the media, something that felt more private and more personal to who she was. I worked with her stylist, Meredith Coop. I wanted to be able to have history somewhat tied into the dress. And so when we came across this dress that had this print, it really did connect me to the history of the Geesbin women and their quilting. And that was a way for me to connect her to not only American history, but Black history without being too didactic. And And yeah, I just, we discussed the way that I paint. We discussed, the fact that her image would be in gray and grisaille because that's the way that I produce my figures. And she was okay with that. It's a moment in history that needed to be documented, and they wanted it to be documented in a way that, when people came into a museum, they realized that something happened here, that something was different here, and there was a space and time that was different than any other space and time. And I think that, you could really see Trump not holding this unveiling as an active erasure of that history, but they hold a legacy that's so great that it can never be erased. And I think he could try to do so, but by doing so, he almost is admitting that it's greater than anything that he could ever, try to belittle.
Very interesting, you saying that. I only have about 30 seconds here at the end of our hour, but your work also in dealing with race in America, you take a particular approach to the palette and how you want people to see things. Could you talk briefly about that before we let you go?
Well, when I started making these pieces, I really wanted to make work that was going to be universal, that could be employed in many different ways. And so representation is important. These images are Black figures, and the way that they sit in museum institutions is important, but I also need them to be relatable to all kinds of people, because sometimes images are the only way that we encounter each other. And so I think it's important that we're able to see each other in different ways. For me as a Black woman to walk into a museum and to see a representation of myself that's positive, and for somebody else who may have no other interaction with people of color to walk into a museum and see the same thing, I think it makes a huge difference in our psyche.
It's really striking, and there's a lot of thought, obviously, behind your work. So learning a little bit more about it now that we've seen some of these iconic images is great. The painter, artist, Amy Sherald, hope to have you back. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.